The winter night in the suburbs of Oak Ridge was so silent that the rustle of dry leaves against the pavement sounded like a desperate whisper. Most of the houses on Willow Creek Lane were dark. Neighbors had long ago turned off their decorative lights to combat the rising utility costs. But outside our small, weather-beaten cottage, things were different. Every night, when the rest of the world slipped into the sanctuary of sleep, I would tiptoe to the hallway and flick the switch for the porch light. "Mark, are you seriously doing this again?" Elena's voice was laced with a mixture of exhaustion and irritation. She stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a faded apron. In her left hand, she clutched a stack of unpaid bills, the catalyst for almost every argument we'd had for the past 6 months. "It's just for a few hours, Elena," I said softly, my eyes fixed on the amber glow that spilled across our driveway and reached toward the edge of the public park across the street. "It's not just a few hours, and it's not just a light, Mark. It's every single night. Have you seen the electric bill this month? We're barely keeping our heads above water with your clerk's salary and my sewing commissions. And here you are, burning money to light up the street for someone who probably doesn't even realize you're doing it." Elena threw the papers onto the dining table with a sharp thud. I walked over to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain just an inch. "Look out there, Elena. It's below freezing tonight. Just look at the bench." Across the road, huddled in the corner of the park, was a figure draped in a tattered gray woolen coat. He was an old man, his hair as white as the frost forming on our windows. He never begged, never bothered anyone. He just sat there, a silent statue against the dark. The neighborhood kids called him the Shadow, but to me, he was just a soul lost in the cold. "He won't die if we turn the light off, Mark," Elena sighed, her tone softening but remaining firm. "He needs a shelter. He needs a hot meal. That light isn't giving him warmth. You're just wasting what little we have." "Maybe you're right," I replied, looking at her tired eyes. "But I like to think that when he wakes up shivering in the middle of the night, that amber glow tells him the world hasn't gone completely dark. It tells him someone is still awake. Someone knows he exists. That light is a thread of hope, Elena. It's a silent promise that he's not invisible." Elena looked at me as if I were a stranger, a dreamer who refused to face the harsh reality of a tightening budget. "Hope doesn't pay the mortgage, Mark. If the bill is over the limit next month, I'm unscrewing that bulb myself. I mean it." She turned and walked toward the bedroom, her footsteps heavy with the weight of our financial struggle. I stayed by the window. Outside, the old man shifted slightly on the wooden slats of the bench. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw him glance toward our house, his eyes catching a reflection of the porch light. I had no way of knowing then that this small act of defiance against the darkness and my wife's pragmatism was about to lead a limousine to our door and unearth a secret that would rewrite our future forever. The following week brought a biting frost that turned the suburban landscape into a brittle world of glass. Despite Elena's warnings, the porch light remained my nightly ritual. It became a silent bridge between my comfortable, albeit struggling, life and the man on the bench. I started calling him the captain in my head, because even in his tattered coat he sat with a strange, rigid dignity, his back never touching the slats of the bench, his gaze always fixed on the horizon, as if navigating a ship through a fog only he could see. I began to push the boundaries of Elena's patience. One evening, after she had fallen asleep, I crept into the kitchen and packed a small thermos with hot vegetable soup and 2 thick slices of sourdough. Stepping outside was like walking into a freezer. The air stung my lungs. As I crossed the street, the amber glow of our porch light followed me, casting a long, dancing shadow. I approached the bench cautiously. The captain didn't move, but his eyes, a piercing, intelligent blue, tracked my every step. "I thought you might be cold," I whispered, placing the thermos on the edge of the bench. He didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, he looked at me, then at the glowing bulb on my porch, and finally back at me. He didn't speak a word, but there was a weight to his silence that felt heavier than any conversation. Close up, I noticed things that didn't fit the profile of a vagrant. His hands, though weathered, were clean. His coat, while old, was made of high-quality wool, the kind that lasted decades. There was an air of fallen grace about him. "Thank you," he finally rasped. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering across pavement, unused but refined. "You're welcome, Captain," I said, the nickname slipping out. He offered a ghost of a smile, then gestured toward my house. "The light, it's a good color, like a hearth." I nodded and hurried back, the cold nipping at my heels. But the peace of that moment was short-lived. The next morning, as I was scraping ice off my windshield, our neighbor, Mr. Henderson, strolled over. Henderson was the self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek Lane's property values. "Morning, Mark," he called out, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Quite a beacon you've got going there every night. You planning on guiding in some lost aircraft?" I tried to laugh it off. "Just keeping the porch safe, Greg." "It's an eyesore, Mark, and it's attracting elements." He gestured vaguely toward the park where the captain was currently sitting. "The neighborhood association is getting calls. People are worried about safety. You keep feeding the strays, they never leave. It's bad for the street." His words felt like a slap. Later that evening, Elena confronted me again. She had seen me talking to Henderson. "Now the neighbors are talking, Mark. It's not just the money anymore, it's our reputation. People think we're encouraging him to stay. Why are you doing this? What do you owe this man?" "I don't owe him anything, Elena," I snapped, my frustration finally bubbling over. "I'm just trying to be a human being. Is that so expensive now that we have to budget for it?" We spent the rest of the night in a cold, suffocating silence. The porch light felt like the only warm thing left in our lives. I watched from the window as the captain drank the soup, his silhouette framed perfectly by that single, defiant bulb. I realized then that our bond wasn't built on words, but on that sliver of light, a signal fire in a neighborhood that preferred the dark. By mid-January, the sky over Oak Ridge turned a bruised, heavy purple. The local news had been screaming warnings for 48 hours. A polar vortex was descending, a storm capable of burying the town in 3 feet of snow and dropping temperatures to life-threatening lows. Inside our house, the atmosphere was just as chilling. Elena had been obsessively checking the weather app, her face pale. "The heater is struggling as it is, Mark. If the power goes out, we're in trouble. We need to conserve every bit of energy." When the sun dipped below the horizon, the wind began to howl, rattling the window pane like a frantic ghost. I moved toward the hallway to flick the porch light on, but Elena was already there, her hand firmly covering the switch. "No," she said, her voice trembling. "Not tonight. The wind is over 50 miles per hour. That old bulb is going to shatter, or worse, cause a short." "And for what?" "He won't be out there, Mark. No one could survive this. He's probably gone to a shelter like a sensible person." "He's never gone to a shelter before, Elena," I argued, my heart hammering against my ribs. "If he's there and he sees the light go out, he'll think we've abandoned him. He'll lose heart. He's a grown man." She shot back. "I am your wife, and I am telling you, I cannot handle one more charity project tonight. We are cold, we are broke, and I am scared. Turn it off. Leave it off." For the first time in our marriage, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes that outweighed her pragmatism. I let go of the switch. I climbed into bed, but sleep was an impossible country. Every time a gust of wind slammed into the house, I imagined the captain on that bench, huddled under a coat that was never meant for sub-zero temperatures. I imagined him looking for the amber glow and finding only the cruel black void of the storm. Around 3 blown am, I couldn't take it anymore. I crept to the window and wiped away the thick layer of frost. The world outside was a white blur of chaotic snow. I couldn't see the park. I couldn't even see the end of our driveway. The porch light was off, and the darkness felt heavy, like a shroud. By morning, the wind had died down, leaving behind a world muffled in a terrifying, beautiful white blanket. The sun came out, bright and mocking. I grabbed a shovel and began to dig, my movements frantic. I didn't care about the driveway. I cleared a path straight across the street toward the park. My heart sank as I reached the bench. It was nothing more than a white mound. I shoveled furiously until the wood appeared. The bench was empty. No thermos, no captain. Just a deep, human-shaped indentation in the snow, and, lying right where his feet would have been, a single, frozen leather glove. It was a fine, expensive-looking glove, but it was lonely. He was gone. He's not there, is he? Elena had followed me out, her boots crunching in the deep snow. Her voice was small, laden with a guilt she couldn't quite hide. "The light was off, Elena," I said, my voice flat. The one thing he looked for was gone. For the next 3 days, the park remained empty. The police had been called to various parts of the city to pick up those who hadn't survived the night, but there was no news of a man in a gray wool coat. A heavy, somber silence settled over our house. I stopped turning the light on. There seemed to be no point in lighting a path for someone who was no longer walking it. I felt like a flame had gone out inside of me. Little did I know, the silence was just the breath before the storm's true aftermath arrived. The week following the storm felt like a funeral. The neighborhood was slowly being dug out, but the park remained a desolate, white wasteland. Every time I pulled into the driveway after work, I looked at the empty bench, and a sharp pang of regret pierced through me. The porch light remained dark. Elena didn't bring it up, and neither did I. The silence between us had grown into a thick wall that neither of us knew how to climb. On Thursday afternoon, the routine was shattered. I was in the garage, mindlessly sharpening a lawnmower blade, when I heard a low, rhythmic hum, a sound too smooth and deep to be a neighbor's SUV or a delivery truck. I stepped out into the driveway, wiping grease from my hands onto a rag, and stopped dead in my tracks. Crawling up Willow Creek Lane was a vehicle that looked like a sleek black Predator in a sea of dusty sedans. It was a Cadillac Limousine, its paint so polished it reflected the winter sun like a mirror. It didn't just drive, it glided. Neighbors began to emerge from their front doors. Mr. Henderson stood on his porch, his mouth hanging open as the car slowed down, its tires crunching softly on the salt-stained asphalt. To my utter bewilderment, the limousine didn't pass. It signaled and turned, pulling right into our modest, cracked driveway. "Mark, what is that?" Elena stood at the front door, her face pale, clutching a sweater around her shoulders. Before I could answer, the driver, a man in a sharp charcoal suit and white gloves, hopped out and opened the rear passenger door. A woman stepped out, and the air around her seemed to change. She was probably in her late 40s, draped in a coat of camel hair wool that cost more than my entire year's salary. Around her neck sat a double strand of perfectly matched pearls that glowed with a soft, ethereal light. She looked around the neighborhood with a mix of sadness and intense focus. When her eyes landed on me, she didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward us, her heels clicking with authority on the cleared concrete. "Are you Mark Turner?" she asked. Her voice was steady, cultured, but I could hear the faint tremor of someone who had been crying for days.
By the mid-1960s, the Bedford TK was no longer just a new model on the market. It had become a national workhorse. Across Britain, its presence was constant, almost invisible in its familiarity. It blended into the background of everyday life, yet it was essential to almost everything that kept the country moving. Local councils were among its biggest users. Street maintenance, refuse collection, road repairs, and public works all depended on fleets of TKs operating daily. In towns and cities, the sound of a TK engine became part of the routine of life, just like factory sirens or morning trains. Construction companies also relied heavily on it. Britain was expanding rapidly during this period, with new housing estates, motorways, and industrial zones emerging across the country. The TK carried sand, gravel, steel, and cement, materials that physically shaped modern Britain. On building sites, it was common to see rows of TK tippers moving in constant cycles, forming a rhythm of construction that defined the era. The British military also recognized its value. In service roles, the TK proved itself dependable, capable of carrying supplies, equipment, and personnel under demanding conditions. Its mechanical simplicity meant it could be maintained even in difficult environments. Beyond Britain, the TK was rapidly becoming a global success. It was exported to Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and other developing regions where road infrastructure was often poor and repair facilities limited. In these environments, the TK's simplicity was its greatest advantage. If something went wrong, it could often be fixed with basic tools and local knowledge. As exports grew, Bedford's reputation strengthened internationally. The TK was seen not just as a British truck, but as a practical solution for countries building their own infrastructure. What made this rise so remarkable was its quiet nature. The TK did not rely on marketing campaigns or luxury appeal. It spread through trust, fleet operators recommending it, drivers relying on it, and mechanics respecting it. By the end of the 1960s, the Bedford TK had become more than a vehicle. It had become part of the infrastructure of modern Britain, quietly powering the systems that kept the nation functioning every single day.